Hey everyone, this is Andreas from the Koalas, and today we speak about the review. In the view of the responsible people, the story's functionality is implemented. The next step is to review the work together with the PO and the architect. What are important points you should think about and consider for that review? How does review and implementation work together? Does it need to be one after the other? Should it be integrated into the implementation phase? And what are our experiences from the daily work? Join the discussion Pia, Rodrigo, and myself had the other day about that crucial part in the software development process. Hi folks, welcome back to the Koalas, where we today speak about the review. The review comes after the implementation, and we, in this discussion, understand about verifying the functionality within the technical team. What I mean with that is the developer did his implementation, the QA checked that it also makes sense from a business point of view, but to have the view of the architecture's vision in it to verify if it goes or supplies the correct content. Now, to kick off that topic, what actually should we already have so that we can fulfill or pursue a review? Pia, perhaps, what are your thoughts?
So in order for me to start such kind of a review, so within the team, I would expect that the developer who did the story, or who mainly implemented the story, already checked on his and her side that things work from her point of view, and then gets together other teammates. So it's not like, yeah, I've written some code and now you look at it. So that's not how I see a review, or throwing some pull request over the fence. I would expect at least so the bare minimum that person who implemented the story or the bug, whatever, already checked that everything works fine. And this also implies, and I have to mention it because it's unfortunately not everybody is doing that, like at least like starting the application on your own machine. Yeah. I have to laugh, otherwise I would cry. I've seen that, and yeah, so yeah, so that would be the bare minimum for me to before starting a review with other teammates. Rodrigo, what do you think?
Yeah, I've been guilty of doing that. I once pushed code to master without even compiling it, but it worked. It was code I made from scratch, so I knew what I was doing. But still, you shouldn't do that. It's not safe. But in addition to everything you've said, one thing I believe it's important if you consider like the whole team participation, and especially someone with an ability of zooming out of that scope, right? To see all the user stories together, and that can be the architect or a senior developer or even a prodigy junior developer. It doesn't matter, but to be able to make inventory of how much technical debt we accrued during this sprint or iteration, because this may affect future plans, right? So for example, if we were tight on deadlines, sure, we need to cut some corners because in the end we have to deliver features. And then I think this is a moment where we need to look back and reflect, okay, which corners did we cut? How do we plan to pay for this debt on the next iteration, or maybe some time ahead? Because if we don't pay, we run in the risk of turning into a big ball of mud, right? And nobody likes a big ball of mud. So yeah, that to me, this is very beneficial when it happens during that stage.
So Pia, you mentioned a very interesting thing, which I think should be a common, you mentioned it yourself, is to verify it before you present it to someone. You just explicitly said that the developers tries it from his point of view. So I guess you speak from local machine, start it up and verify. But which perhaps points or considerations you should take that's probably not enough? What would you prefer actually, where it should be demonstrated, or where should that review happen?
So as we've already discussed in our previous videos, is like when we come to that stage of review, of presenting something to other team members, I expect that person knows the story. So in that story we already discussed in several stages where to test and where we need to deploy it to be able to actually then decide, is this really done? Is it fine? Can we in the end then close it if everything is good? So so when going into that review, I expect that exactly this information is handled. So when we decided in the story description, in the refinement, we want to have it deployed here and there for our final review, then that should be there. And some things, there are items which you can verify on a dev environment. There are things which you can only verify at the integration environment or some user acceptance test environment. Call it however you like, but there are, like, it depends. What do you need? Do you need surrounding systems? Do you need specific test data? All that stuff, and that should have been discussed already much earlier. So for the review, that shouldn't be a point of discussion anymore.
Perfect. So just to clarify, where to test, we mean the environment, right? On which environment the feature should be deployed to, in order that we can verify its functionality. So yeah, you're totally right. That should be clear from the beginning. And also when we come together and do that review, that should be clear and obvious to everyone on which environment we are now currently. When we now come to this review, what should be actually verified in such a review? What are the considerations we take that the work is good, or we need to iterate perhaps over again? What are your thoughts, Rodrigo, on that one?
That one, I think the minimum I would do is just verify that the acceptance criteria are met. Because without that, it's not really done, right? And then, of course, like ideally, when you're doing that, it's also a double check to make sure that we are meeting the definition of done, right? And as Pia pointed out, and it happens frequently, is that you run things on your local dev machine and then it works. And then as soon as you put it on a UAT environment, then you see that there's a lot of failures at integration points. So I think those are the two most important stages, because to me, it is important that when we go to present to stakeholders what we done, we present it on an environment that looks as close as possible to production, so they can get a sense of what the increment of value was, so they can provide feedback or direction, or even have new ideas by seeing it in action, right? So that's how I see it.
Great. Pia, do you have additions to that?
Like from my experience, what we have done, and it probably doesn't have to be like for every story or for every bug fix, but usually I always thought about for regression tests, what that's usually something that's still more on the QA's desk, to always have a look on that as well. Is this specific story or bug fix or whatever influencing any of our regression tests? So, also checking not only acceptance criteria and integration, but also like a little bit around up and down some important use cases. Yeah. I think the rest, like Rodrigo mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, and all that is assuming that we have a comprehensive test suite running automatically on a pipeline, right? Because otherwise, then it's just crazy.
That's actually a very interesting part you just mentioned. Also, in the last talks we had, probably in implementation, we talked about that we actually test when we implement it, and it's not like now in the review we surprisingly have, from what we did, some failing tests, right? Because that should never lead us to the point that we are now in a review. But what are perhaps specific points most people forget to check before the review, or even at all, to verify a story? Because currently we just spoke about functional requirements, right? But non-functional requirements are mostly forgotten, not really looked at or pushed back. What do you think about that topic?
I don't know how to test that in a UAT environment. For non-functional requirements, well, it all depends, right? So the only the first non-functional requirement that comes to my mind, would be latency, right? But it's easy to test latency when you have one user, the test user. But you should test with the normal load and see if you respect the latency. So yeah, I don't think that's the ideal state to run that stage to run that kind of test. Should be run as early as possible as well. Ideally, when you go to review, you should already know that it works for the non-functional requirements.
So you would just, well, that's a very controversial topic, and I believe for that we can do an entire other video. So yeah, let's perhaps talk about that in another occasion. Pia, do you have something else which you, from daily work, perhaps observed during reviews, what you think should be improved or which you're missing?
I was lucky with my teams. So I just like to point out, I think it's like, don't forget to look at how, like a code review, how is it written? Can someone else follow? I mean, you won't be there forever. So if some other developer, like in I don't know, 6 months or a year, needs to redo something, is it does it follow clean code conventions, that stuff? That's important. So not just make it look nice on the surface, so on the UI, but also make it nice and proper where users don't see it. And then it comes again to the non-functional stuff, so like load performance, security, all those things. But yes, I agree. I think we can do a whole video only for the non-functional requirement stuff. Yes.
I personally, for me, discovered one point in the review which came up a lot, and that's technical debt, as you already mentioned, Rodrigo. And most of the time, it's just talked about, but it's not really picked up and processed. So what I mean with that, really go in and create a follow-up story for technical debts which came up, or perhaps check, should we just fix it now within that story, which is most of the times the better option, right? But sometimes it would just be too big of an effort, and we need to postpone it and perhaps also make some more investigations down the road. That's one of the topics I believe people see challenges in the product at this stage quite a lot and quite often, but they missed miss it to document it or to make it then visible. It's always that, we'll know in the future and when we think about it again. But I think if people would, in this stage, more often really document it and create immediately stories out of that, that would be optimization for the future as well. So, quick catch up. The review we spoke today is really about the different rules coming together. So the responsibles who implemented the story, and to verify with the architect to have a neutral view on it, how the implementation went so far in terms of technical depth, in terms of the acceptance criteria, are they fulfilled or not, and the verification on the target system where we need to verify the story. So if there are external systems, dependencies to external systems, we actually have to verify that on the UAT system. And next, we would like to speak more about how we actually then finally come to close that story and bring life to our product in form of new features. Thanks a lot for today and see you soon.